Welcome to the podcast that refuses to let you live on autopilot. This isn't about motivation quotes or someday plans. It's about real tools, clear decisions, and the strategies that turn intention into momentum. Your presenters are coaches and truth tellers who live this work. They help people break stuck patterns, cut through noise, and build lives that actually move forward. No theory, no fluff, just execution. This is for people done circling the runway, ready to choose growth over comfort, ready to build their best life on purpose. So lean in. Here are your hosts, Christine Baylor-Goodlander and Melanie Olivieri.
Hey, beautiful people. It's Christine from Collaborative Growth Coaching, and I'm sitting outside with my guest today, who is Eric Goodlander. Eric is a JD, and he's also a reverend, an ordained minister. And today we're going to talk about a non-traditional ceremony and how ceremony plays a part in people's lives. So, Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So what does non-traditional ceremony mean to you? And why do you think people seek them?
A non-traditional ceremony is one that is not based on a specific rite or a specific creed. It is something that you can work with the people to see what they want, whether they want a prayer, which prayer, readings. Uh, it's very personalized to people. It still has the spiritual element. However, it just doesn't have the structure of an organized faith.
Right. So how do you think that the meaning of ceremony has evolved for today's world?
I think it's a coming back to ceremony.
Interesting.
1960s, you had a disruption of society.
Mhm.
You had a lot of breaking down of traditional values. That was seen in the 1970s, especially. And I think it reasserted itself with the children of the 70s in the 90s and 2000s. But now I think you're seeing people in an uncertain world wanting some certainty. So to them, a ceremony is giving them something to grasp onto to show that there's some meaning to what they're doing rather than just living together or this is my partner or this is my significant other.
Mhm.
This way, there's a characterizing of the ceremony into a status that you can grasp onto.
Uh, So y- your references have been a lot towards, uh, I'm assuming, marital types of unions. What do you see for end of life type of ceremony? Do you see a change in that as well as unions?
Absolutely. Because you have more people today that are identifying as atheist, agnostic, or just non religious.
Mhm.
In the 1970s and 60s, atheists were approximately 1% of the population, and nobody even knew what the term agnostic actually meant.
Mm.
Now you've seen a greater number of people that are identifying as atheist, agnostic, or just non denominational. And even so, people want some sort of end of life ceremony. It's a rite of passage from here to the next world or to nothing, depending on what you believe. But people do want some sort of a closure. And I think non traditional ceremonies, like for somebody that has no belief to a very vague spiritual belief, is becoming more prevalent. And you'll also notice that there's a lot of people in that same vein not going with the 3-day wake, not going with the church ceremony. They want something personal, they want something brief. And that is probably, you know, now much more prevalent than it ever has been.
I have to agree with you. Sitting with people and talking about end of life with them and what they would like to see, it's part of what we do as doulas in in our realm, and talking to them really brings out what would you really, really like, we get I was raised traditional Catholic, for example, or I was raised in a traditional Jewish faith, and that's not really what I feel. I feel like I want to have something else brought to the forefront of, of my end of life. So I had a woman tell me the other day that she would like to have a shaman at her service to perform the service. And the people that she has around them who, do you see people looking for connection to the people around them and selecting who they would like to be at their service or in their part of their service?
I think that that's more a part of the whole move toward personal perspective rather than community. In the 1800s, 1900s, everything was community based, small town, you all knew each other. This was all part of the general structure. Society over the past 100 years has devolved to the point where close relatives are no longer down the street. The people you work with aren't across the road from you. So I think what happens now is because there's um, almost like an anomic feeling that it arose really from the 1950s forward. Now people are thinking back and they want something traditional, but they want it more personalized. They want to be involved with just those that are closest to them. So
There's there's different types of ceremony that go on. And we're not looking at, say, just weddings or just funerals or just, some type of union. Um, yeah, I've never experienced it, so I don't know, but they have like divorce ceremonies that people talk about, and I think in my interpretation of what it is it's really a healing kind of ceremony.
I think it can be if people are in agreement and haven't been um, basically thrown down a hostility spiral by the attorneys,
Mhm,
which makes that almost impossible.
mhm,
However, if people were allowed to negotiate, arbitrate, and end things amicably, you'd have more of a situation where this type of ceremony would be more applicable.
mhm.
Unfortunately, it's almost like a militarization of the end of a relationship. So I think that while in the future you may see more of that and you may see people seeking that, as long as the system as it exists now is so adversarial based that it's very difficult.
I can understand that. Are you open to things like milestone birthday ceremonies or like adoption ceremonies, kind of a and I hesitate to use the word blessing because if I say the word blessing, then people are going to automatically think that I'm talking about God in some fashion, and that's not what I mean. But by the word blessing.
Right. Again, but these ceremonies are all about rights. I
Hmm.
mean, somebody becomes an adult. In the Jewish faith, it's 13.
Hmm.
Other people's 18. Some others is 21. Or in other cases, it's whenever you decide to follow the tenets of your faith.
Hmm.
So those are important and they can be done for any age. They can do anything, for maybe entering adulthood or a certain milestone birthday like 50 or 75 or anniversaries 10, 25, 50, whatever seems right. We don't have to follow that rule that, every year, you have to have a huge celebration, but it can just be a milestone. Um, I think the other thing too is when you look at it, there's many other rites in organized faith,
Hmm.
like baptisms, that really um, are outside of the purview of somebody doing something non-denominational because you're not actually creating somebody's status in a certain faith.
Right.
But there can be welcoming ceremonies. There can be, and I think you can use the word blessing because almost every faith uses the word to some degree to just state that we're wishing and we're all praying or we're all thinking or wishing for the best life or outcome for a child
Mm.
or a person. So I think that the blessing, it may have different connotations to different people, but
Right.
I still think it's an applicable term if you take it on a much wider basis.
Yeah. Can do you f- do you feel like ceremony can be deeply sacred? without it being tied to an organized religion?
I think absolutely it can be. It depends on the people that are participating in it. Um, I think that I did a wedding just a month ago,
Mhm.
and the two participants, the couple was getting married, and I think that when you look at them, they're teaching it. They're actually treating it as a very sacred vow,
Mhm.
and one that is actually going to be forever. So yes, it can be something very sacred without having to have something specific. Sacred is something that you believe is very important. It doesn't always mean that uh, it's something that is like very uh, idealistic, like say a statue or an object,
Mhm.
like a spring. But there are many things that can be sacred, just like the vow between people or the beliefs that they share. That is sacred.
So, why do you believe that ritual matters so much in times of transition for people?
I think it's important because it gives people a focus to say that I'm changing from this to that.
Hmm.
And when we say that, it can be one state from life to death,
Hmm.
from single to married, from married to non-married.
Right.
It can be anything, and it can be anything like a child, especially when they start to go to school.
Hmm.
There might be a right for that, that you're now 5 years old, you're in school, you're on your way. It doesn't matter. But I think ritual is important to a degree. It doesn't have to be overblown. It just has to be something to make a recognition, and it is something important to the person. So basically, ritual is very important because it gives us certain set places in our life where we're at that we're making changes in, and that we recognize that change. Um, and I use marriage as a big one for a lot of people
Hmm.
because now all of a sudden it's like at that point you're also talking about sharing a life, but also having children, a family, other issues. And instead of leaving it a gray area, a ritual such as a marriage or that basically says we're in a different phase.
And how can ceremony help people process grief, change, or transformation?
Right. Ceremonies, especially if you're talking about grief or loss, uh, obviously it can't take away pain. It can't take away the knowledge that there's a severe loss to someone. But I think what it is it's a end point where you can say, from this point on, I have to move forward. There's no gray area anymore. There's a situation where we're not, with that person any longer. They're not in our life no matter who they are, but it gives people a stopping point in their old life versus their new life in relationship to the person that is gone. And that's an important factor for them because in most cases it allows them to move forward and to see what the next phase for them is.
So, yeah, speaking in maybe a personalized ceremony, what kind of misconceptions do you think exist because people choose a personalized ceremony?
I think people think that it's not real, that if they have a personalized service, that
Hmm.
it doesn't mean anything if you don't follow a rote book.
Hmm.
I mean, and I'm not going to point out any certain religion as being good, bad, or their rites being good or bad. However, if you go to a certain faith and they've got a certain, say, wedding or funeral liturgy
Hmm.
or service or whatever they may have, it follows a certain set plan.
Hmm.
And people think that if we don't all follow that plan, that for some reason it doesn't mean as much. And I think the problem with it is people think that you have to have, you know, a certain prayer, a certain hymn, a certain way of doing things. And it could be anything depending on the faith that you may have been born into or you've read about or you've
Hmm.
seen. But I think that people don't realize that in the end, it's all very personal anyway. And I think what happens is people don't always understand that people have different beliefs than they may have when they observe the ceremony or
Hmm.
the rite. Um, and they don't understand that. And I think what happens is they have to be educated that everybody has different beliefs and you have to accept that everyone may have a different opinion on the way things are done. and may be happy with a different method of that rite, no matter what it may be.
Mhm. I mean, I find it fascinating. I guess that's a good word. Fascinating, when people can literally sit down and say, "This is what I would like for, in my realm at the end of my life. This is what I would like to see. This is the music I would like to play. These are how I would like the lighting to be, who I'd like to be present, who I'd prefer didn't come." It's a thing. It's a thing, especially if there's family,
Hmm.
family dynamics are a big thing. And there's times when you say, "You know what? I have certain people that I don't want to be in my, transition phase as my ceremony comes along. I want who I love and respect and who love and respect me." So, and I think that is something that we, and I say that as, doulas collectively try to strive for, to, push people, not push, but drive people towards what it is that they want, not what it is that someone else wants. And
That,
finding someone that's going to fulfill those wishes for them.
that's very correct. And I think what happens is you're seeing a shift to this.
Mhm,
And um, I think that we've always been looking at that a religious person or uh, you know, anyone who is presenting a rite or a ceremony has to be from a certain method of education.
mhm,
We're all taught that if, say, in the Jewish faith, the rabbi may come from a long line of rabbis, it's almost an inherited position in a lot of families. And you have to go through yeshiva for so many years and then shul.
mhm,
Um, in the Catholic faith, you have to go to seminary, you have to follow the rules, and you have so many things you have to do. um, and I think the other thing too is when you look at it, there's other faiths like the Hindu faith where your religious leader may be a bricklayer
mhm,
and he may not have any education other than reading and knowing the stories of your faith,
mhm,
which is very informal. Whether it be whether you go to school and get a doctorate of divinity or some sort of a degree from a seminary or some other religious school, or you can be self-educated. You can go the route of going through the internet, and
mhm,
people seem to laugh at that. However, the thing about that is it recognizes that a lot of people of great faith or of great belief or even of no faith or no belief but who believe in ritual, who believe in a ceremony, who believe in helping us in assisting other people. You don't need a degree to do that. You just need to have the right mindset and the
mhm,
right quality of character. um, and I think that's what you see with a lot of people why they do that. A lot of people do that just so they can marry a family member or
mhm.
relative or something else. But there's an awful lot. There are thousands of people that have gone non-traditional routes that actually start their own churches.
Interesting. So I just have a couple more questions for you. Can you share with our listeners a ceremony that deeply moved you?
Well, I think the my first ceremony would be my son's and future daughter-in-law's marriage, and I was very honored to be asked to do that. It was kind of out of the blue, and then uh, I chose some readings, and I wrote a little homily for the beginning, for better want of a better word, and I utilized vows that they would have liked and approved of. They wanted more modern vow. They didn't want the love, honor, cherish, obey, or any of that
Mm,
stuff. But there are ways of more modern that, will you listen to each other? Will you help each other? And I think that that was very moving. And then I think as a follow on to that, his best man and his fiance came over to the house and then asked me to preside on theirs based on that, which again was something that made me ecstatic to know. And like I say, I just performed their wedding recently,
mhm.
um, and as a result, I'm going to be doing several more in the future.
That's great, and that's great. That's always having doing a ceremony for your own child, bring a tear to the eye for sure,
Correct.
and opens your heart right up and just makes you feel. I can't imagine the joy.
Correct.
I can imagine the joy as a parent, but the joy of, creating that environment for them, is wonderful. So, if there's any takeaways that you would like our listeners to have about the power of ceremony, what would you want that to be?
I would think that the thing to take away is to not ignore milestones in life, and you may want to celebrate 30 different milestones. You may only want to do 2, maybe 1.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of I think it's important to recognize what's important to you and what will make you happy, what will make an impact on your life and the life of whoever else is impacted by that ceremony or rite. Um, and I think that there's nothing wrong with going off script, um, telling people that what you want ahead of time. If you're on if you're thinking about end of life, is talk to people ahead of time and not be afraid of it, um, because this way you are able to communicate to people even after you're gone what you felt, what you wanted, what you thought, and the same goes for the beginning of life as well.
Perfect. Perfect. So, we thank you for joining us today on this podcast. And as always, if you've heard anything that speaks to you, anything that you think would speak to someone else, please like, share, definitely subscribe. And we love your feedback. So please, reach out to us and let us know. Maybe there's a topic that you would like us to cover, and maybe there's something that you'd like to talk about and share with the general public about life and how you lead it very intentionally. So, in that vein, Eric's information will be listed at the end of this podcast if you want to get in touch with him as a celebrant. He's more than happy to have that conversation with you. And I want to remind you to keep dwelling in your limitless possibilities